1st of February 2010, and I'm talking with Peter Toogood, undoubtedly the best golfer that Tasmania has produced. Peter, I won't ask you to run through all your tremendous list of achievements, but I will ask you, which of your achievements do you think was most outstanding as far as you're concerned?
Well, for many years I played interstate golf from 1948 right through till 1980. And we always had in our team some very good players. Roy Stott, my brother, Peter Brown, and myself, and Ned Bowditch from Royal Hobart. But we could never beat the interstate teams. Like we would beat New South Wales this year, but not Victoria. And then the next year we'd beat Victoria, but not New South Wales. So that became a long and dreary and hopeful ambition that we would win the interstate, because I always believed we had as good a players as they had on the mainland. 1968, the interstate series was played at Royal Hobart at the present course, and we won that event by more games than had been won previously in any interstate series. I can recall Roy Stott and Roy had been in the team since the early 50s, and this was in 1968. We sat in my lounge room that afternoon after we'd won and just looked at one another with a grin on our face and never spoke for an hour. We were so thrilled, and it was one of the greatest achievements, I think, for me personally, that we eventually got the team together that won that interstate series.
What a great achievement for the team, and of course for Royal Hobart.
And for Tasmania.
And for Tasmania.
Yeah.
Peter, I understand your connection with Royal Hobart goes a long way back, not just when you became a member.
No. As a caddy at Kingston, when I was about 14 or 15, I used to caddy for Len Nettlefold and Rupert Payton. We'd travel up from Kingston, catch the ferry across the Derwent to Royal Hobart, and of course I had to sit and wait after the game for quite some time while they had a good time in the bar. And it was a long day, but very enjoyable. The ferry trip was very convivial, going back with all the players, and especially after they'd had a few beers. And another occasion, when the pontoon bridge came into being, I was still a caddy, and there was Dudley Jones and Des Arnold and Lance Bainton. They came up from Kingston in Dudley Jones' little Austin little brown box thing, and so I had to sit in that while they had a good time after the game. They came out, and as Dudley Jones started the car up, it slipped off the side of the road on the gravel. There was a gravel car park. Slipped off that. They got out, ha, picked the car up and put it back on the road and drove home. And I've never forgotten that. And Royal Hobart was a very good course at Rosny, and subsequent to that I played an exhibition match there with Bobby Locke, and I can recall he, against the sea breeze, decided to extend himself a bit and got on the last hole in 2, par 5. Played another exhibition match there with Max Faulkner and Di Rees. Max Faulkner had won the British Open that particular year, and he came out and they toured round Australia and came to Rosny, and another one was with Gary Player there, Dad and I, and I think it was Bill Swaby. We played the exhibition match there with Gary Player. So at the Rosny course there were many highlights, and I can't recall whether I won the Open there, but my very first pennant match was against Doug Weatherhead at Rosny. My very first pennant match. And he was the club champion at the time. And I beat him on the 19th. I can remember that as clear as anything. That was about 47, 48, 47, I think.
I think you joined the Royal Hobart Club in 62, was it?
Yes, I'd been transferred to Launceston teaching, lecturing at the Teachers' College. I brought my wife down to have a look at the proposed new course at 7 Mile Beach, and I said, that's where we'll live if I get transferred. And she got quite a shock because there was only bush and a few shacks, and you're not taking me out there. You won't believe this, but within a fortnight of returning to Launceston, after I got a notification that I was being transferred to Hobart, to the Hobart Teachers' College. So I rang straight away, and there was one block left in Lewis Avenue, so I bought that. And
that's where we are doing this interview.
That's where we are now, yeah.
That's right. Peter,
and that was in 63 I came here.
Yeah.
But to purchase the box, I had to join Royal Hobart. But I had no intention of going back to Kingston Beach because I'd experienced frost and ice and floods and everything there. And from my experience around Australia, a golf course on a sand belt eventually became a championship course.
Right, I was wondering why you left Kingston, because I would have thought it would be a big emotional thing for you, given your father's involvement there and your brother's involvement there. Was it a hard decision to make, to change from Kingston to Royal?
Not really, John, because I'd spent a couple of years at Melbourne University, and then I'd been 5 years up in Launceston, so I'd had a break from Kingston.
Right.
And I couldn't wait to see the development at 7 Mile Beach.
So you played as a member of Royal at Rosny for about a year, a bit less than a year?
Yes.
Okay. What was your reaction compared when you moved from there to the new course here?
Oh, I just knew that it was going to become a very good golf course. There was no question about it. Some
of the highlights that you saw take place at Royal, not involving yourself, but obviously there have been a lot of major events that have been held here over the years. Do any of those stand out in your mind particularly?
Well, the fact that we had the Australian Amateur and the Interstate Series here, it wasn't, maybe it was possible to have it at some other course in Tasmania, but the fact that Royal was such an outstanding layout and golf course, the Australian Golf Union didn't hesitate to say, well, you can have your turn. And of course it's been here quite often, well, every 6 years or so since. And I think probably the Australian Open being played in Tasmania at Royal Hobart again in 1971, and it was just by chance, I think, it was the greatest influx of overseas golfers taking part in the Australian Open that particular year. So we had the biggest number of overseas top pros playing at Royal Hobart. And of course, Jack Nicklaus was one of them. And he won, and he was, in my opinion, at the height of his career when he played here. There was no question about that. He went on to win some other big tournaments just after that, winning by big margins. So I think we were fortunate to see him at his very best.
What about some of the players, I'm talking about members of the club, who have stood out in your mind as very good players and came to your attention?
Well, Ned Bowditch was a very good, should I say Lionel Bowditch, was a very good competitor and a good A-grade golfer, and he played for many years for Tasmania. Andrew Hill, of course, has developed into a great, and still is a very good golfer, had tremendous potential. And we had a lot of very good juniors there at one stage, extremely good. And they had the potential, but it was the course that brought the best out of them.
Good. Peter, you've been a member of Royal for over 40 years. What are some of the significant changes since when you first came here and at the present time?
Well, I'm pleased to say that there hasn't been many changes in the golf course. The administration has always been very good and very professional. There was one change, and I was on the committee at the time, when we moved for the third tee across the water. There were some members not real happy about having to hit across the water, but it became it's one of the holes on the golf course now. But that's only the biggest change. Other than that, I would say it's the growth on the fairways. We have initially there was a lot of run in the early days while the course was maturing, but now, of course, it plays very long, and all interstate players comment on that, the fact that the yardage or meterage,
whatever it
is a true indication of the length of the course. Yeah.
One change that several people have commented on is the change as far as standards of dress are concerned. I would imagine when you first started playing at Royal and you went upstairs after a game, it would be jacket and tie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I used to make the juniors wear a jacket and tie too. And dress appropriately, but I noticed, yes, there does seem to be more relaxed, but still proper.
Yeah.
And I noticed there's a bit lax on the golf course.